I was wide open for that, and wide open for the experience in the cosmos, and open enough to hear this voice. So, and after I answered, I guess telepathically or just in my soul, yes, I want to live, and I'm willing to accept whatever would come next, because I thought that was the more important thing. I really felt like I was protected, like I was going to be okay. And as crazy as it looked outside the cockpit, seeing the ground coming up and the horizon falling and, just getting lower and lower, I had this sense of protection, the sense of comfort, sense of just being. I wasn't alone. There was no way I was alone, even though there was no other human being in the cockpit. I was absolutely not alone.
Welcome, everyone, to That Death Show. My name is Anne, and with me, as always, is the one and only Tim Wyatt, coming to us from Greece right now. And we have a very, very, very special guest with us tonight. This is a huge show. We've been looking forward to this forever. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the one and only Chris Sheridan. He is a beautiful soul with a remarkable story of resilience and spiritual awakening from his days as a long-haired rock and roller back in the day in Hollywood. And his band is called, or was called, Sweet Savage. It still is, and it's still online. And I'm surprised we didn't meet back in the day, Chris, because I was down there, Whiskey, Roxy, Rainbow, all that. But not only is he a talented musician, he also went on to work with the Manly P. Hall Philosophical Research Society. Chris's journey has been one of extraordinary transformation. He's an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, a Student Academy Award for a short film. He is a private plane crash survivor, and he has spent over half of his life using a wheelchair. He's the author of Spirit in the Sky, a memoir, and he's the host of Living the Inner Life podcast. So please, everybody, get ready for a powerful and inspiring conversation with Chris about his spiritual experience and so much more. But before we start, Chris, before we hand the floor over to you, we often say here at That Death Show that you don't have to have an NDE to earn the wisdom gained there. Chris's extraordinary story begins with a spiritual vision before the plane crash that he fell from the heavens from, and it absolutely changed his life. So the floor is yours, sweetheart.
Well, thank you both for having me. I've been enjoying the show. Each episode is full of surprises and insights and everything, and it's just really great to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, honey. We're just really grateful to have you here. The ethos of your podcast, Living the Inner Life, very, very similar. That's actually how we connected, was when we were doing the Unfolding Consciousness book study series, and I found your podcast. If you'd like to, have you shared your experience as a one-all, tell-all yet on a podcast?
As far as my plane crash spiritual experience, yeah, I've told bits and pieces over the years. There's been parts of it that I kept very close to me, very private for a number of years. I talked about the voice I had in the plane very early on, but I didn't speak too much about the vision. It's kind of involved, and for some reason, I don't know if it falls on the audience too well, but I think our audience, I think that is your Death Show viewers, will get it, because it's in that realm. I think we're just talking at a cocktail party or a brunch or something. You're talking about visions you had in a plane crash. Not everybody wants to hear that, but I think we're all on board with this type of thing.
I understand. And what I was thinking is, if you just want to start from the beginning, wherever you feel comfortable, sweetheart.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying it's technically not a near-death experience in the chronology when it happened before I got injured, before I was in the hospital. This happened I was a private pilot. I was competing in an air show in Kanab, Utah. There were other pilots and planes around the airport. Everybody saw it. This was in 91, so it was before cell phones and everyone had a video. So there's eyewitnesses, but not a lot of video. And the experience itself that I had was in between the time I called a mayday on the radio and when the plane hit the ground. Usually, and really in every way, when you call a mayday, you're trained to do this in certain conditions. Usually it's the last thing you're going to say over the radio, and quite possibly the last thing you say on Earth is Mayday, 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 and it's the last thing you wanted. But that was after I had already tried A, I had tried B, I had tried C in the airplane to try to recover. First of all, find out what the condition was, and then having figured that out, how I might be able to get out of it and recover from the stall. But it became apparent that I wasn't going to be able to. And at that time, I called a Mayday on the radio, and from people on the ground, a lot of these people that were watching, the spectators, were aircraft builders themselves. So a lot of engineering skills and mathematical skills. And the consensus was that it was about 22 seconds between the time I called a Mayday and when the aircraft hit the ground. So that's the time frame where I had this spiritual experience of a first magnitude. And it was really in 3 acts, 3 distinct parts, sequences. But the first one was really kind of the incredible one. And I'll get into that right now if you want.
Yes.
Because it goes, it can be applied to really any kind of a thing, with or without an injury, with or without an NDE, excuse me. Now, when you think of a near-death experience, what we hear a lot is, there's a tunnel, or first of all, maybe you're outside of your body looking down. Maybe there's a tunnel, a light. There's people at the end of it, this kind of narrow focus. In every way possible, the experience I had was the exact opposite. There was no tunnel. I was in the middle of the cosmos. It was completely wide open. There were no people there. There were no guides. There was no one waiting for me. My life didn't flash before me. In fact, I probably experienced all life, past, present, and future, happening all at once. So called a Mayday on the radio, and one of the other pilots came back and said, what's the problem? Tell me what's up. And I just, for some odd reason, I pulled out this line from Top Gun. I said, "This is not good." And that's the last thing I said. And even in the moment, that kind of like, where did that come from? Why would I say that? It's just, a movie line, kind of a throwaway movie line, but very similar situation. So at that point, everything started getting quiet. I don't know if you've ever driven a car on snow, or you hit a patch of snow, like fresh snow. It gets very quiet, very soft. The steering wheel doesn't really move. You're not really, it's kind of nice, a little unsettling, but it's kind of, oh, this is nice. So there was a little bit of that. And I was looking at the instruments on the panel in front of me in the cockpit, and I could see like the compass and the directional gyro and the artificial horizon. They kind of pulled out from the panel, and they were going around me. It turned into this really intricate complex of dials and numbers and gauges, and 10 times what would have ever been in the cockpit. Very very complicated, like celestial navigation going on, almost where it filled the whole field of vision in all these numbers and like very old school coordinates and things. And at some point, all the numbers stopped, all the dials ceased moving, and they all clicked into place. And then at that moment, the heavens opened up. I lost the sense that I was in an airplane. It was like I had come through the clouds, and then in front of me, I was in outer space. I could see, it looked like a galaxy, like the Andromeda Galaxy, but I knew it was more than that. And there was a fiery ring of an infinity symbol, like an electrical plasma fire, very hard to describe. It was completely overwhelming. It was the entire space-time continuum. It was totality. It was infinity. And I was in the middle of it. I was part of it. And I could see everything happening at once, always, this constant repetition in a single moment. There was no really time or space. It was all at one. And this is a very common thing that you might hear in spiritual traditions. But I had a visceral experience with it. And I guess at the time I thought, okay, well, I was pretty sure I was going to die. So I figured, well, okay, I'm being shown the realm beyond. But all the little points of light in the galaxy and this whole star cluster, I zoomed in and they were all connected. They weren't points of light. They were little dashes when I got closer, and they were all connected to each other through this, looked like a crystalline lattice, for lack of a better term, kind of fragile, but kind of thin and gossamer strands, but very, very deeply connected. And I got the sense that each one of these dots were really a dash, because in your life span, if you look at a headstone or something, it's born such and such a day, and then there's a dash, and then you died on such a date. And it's the dash, that's our life. That's the moving through space, across time. You get a little dash, a little streak of your current life, but they were all connected. And I got the strongest sense that, yes, this dash was mine. It represented my life in the context of the entirety. And so it was incredibly small, but I also got the sense that if you were to remove any one of those, if you were to pull any component out of this whole structure, the entire thing would collapse. That it was dependent entirely on all the component parts. And that's where the strength was, but you couldn't add anything, you couldn't remove anything. So got a sense of being very, very small, but also very, very important, even in this smallness, as far as the whole compound of what I was seeing. So I just felt like, wow, okay, this is it. And it was very comforting that, okay, this is where I'm going to go, or I'll just go back into the ether or the construct, wherever you were before you were born, maybe the same place you go when you die, this Bardo plane, this holding pattern, before the next incarnation. And I just felt satisfied with that. Like, well, okay, I have a part in the universe, and it's been marked. No sparrows fall is left unnoticed, as is said in scriptures. And as soon as I really got that sense of connection, the dials and all the navigation stuff faded away, the galaxy faded away, and I found myself back in the cockpit, back in my body, back in the airplane. But there was no sense of being teleported. It was as if you turned a dial and it turned up the volume on something, or opened up like a window. I didn't get a sense that I was moving somewhere. I was just there, and it was complete continuity. There was no blank spots, there was no flash or anything. It was like, I'm doing this, I'm talking to you now, I'm looking here, I'm talking with my hands. Just as matter of fact as that is okay. I'm in the airplane, there's all these dials. Wow, I'm in space-time continuum, and here I am, I'm in infinity, and having this full oneness, very, very Zen experience. And so that was really the first part of it. But that's really been profound, because that helps me feel that connection. And when I, ever since then, when I read people becoming one with everything, a Zen moment, being fully in the now, being fully present, I experience that. It's not a concept. It's not something intellectually that I have to wrap my head around. It's something my being went through.
It's very interesting, all this, because what happens to Chris takes place within a few seconds of physical time, and yet what Chris seems to be experiencing is this sense of timelessness, but also what has been described, I suppose, you said it as a Zen moment, but it's described sometimes as cosmic consciousness, where everything is connected to everything else, and there is no sense of separation. And it's this feeling, I suppose, which characterizes a number of not only near-death experiences, but out-of-the-body experiences where time stops and there is no linear time anymore. It's all, everything that has happened, will happen, and is happening right now. So it's a fascinating idea that what took place, Chris, was within, 5, 10, 15 seconds or something like that.
Yes.
Were you a spiritually minded person? Was this the way that you were leaning before this? Did you kind of know what that was going on? Were you accepting of that, or was this a brand new thing?
No, I had really been on the spiritual path and track for a long time. This was 91. So I had been going to Sedona, Arizona for years in the harmonic convergence in '89, and went to the Bodhi Tree, which, for those who don't know, was like the New Age mecca of Los Angeles, a town that actually is kind of a New Agey place to begin with. And from the 70s onward, this was like the central place to go to get a book, to hear a lecture, to get some incense. I've frequented there quite a bit. UFOs, I was going to Giant Rock and exploring all these things for a very long time. I read the Tao of Physics maybe 5 years before then. So I was never brought up religious, but I was always interested in spirituality and really just got my hands on anything I could and to read about these different things. So it wasn't a completely unknown thing. As a matter of fact, it made sense. I already had a baseline of at least concepts to draw from. And maybe on a personal level, I think we get, in moments of trauma, we get the images and the message that we can understand, one that speaks in our language. And for me, the celestial, this, being out there in the cosmos, I always loved astronomy as a kid growing up. I probably was going to go down that track and be an astronomer until I found the electric guitar, and that changed things, but still up all night looking at lights and all that. So didn't change too much, although it was dramatic. So that had been like a childhood interest and, constantly. So the scientific, I could see it in terms of that. Maybe somebody else would get the same message in a different set of archetypal imagery. And this is the one I got. So it spoke to me scientifically. I was like, space-time, here's the galaxy, here's all there is. Because, just even 100 years ago in 1925, we, as a culture, thought that the Milky Way was it. We didn't know there were other galaxies. I think in 1926, Hubble and some other people got together and figured out, some of these other points of light, like Andromeda, are actually galaxies. Now we know there are millions and billions of galaxies. But 100 years ago, that was it. When you looked up, that's what they thought the entire thing was. So, and I knew that then. So I think it was the symbolism and the language, visual language, that really spoke to me. It wasn't anything really new. So spiritually as well as astronomically, and then all these gauges and dials, fit in with my piloting sensibilities. But I was being transported. I don't know if I actually left the spot, but there's an old woodcut called Peering Through the Cosmos. There's a guy, it's an old Flammarion, I think probably from alchemy. He's on his hands and knees, and there's the sun and the moon. There's a landscape and a town, and he's lifting up the curtain in the corner, and behind it are all these wheels and, bizarre images from the, like what's behind the curtain. That's, I really connected with that image later when I saw that. It's like, that's it. That's what I did. I didn't really go anywhere, but I kind of peered behind the veil and maybe got a sense, at least through what I'm able to conceive of what's underlying, this ultimate reality behind the world of illusions and Maya that we go through every day.
But can I ask you, Chris, have you had any subsequent experiences of similar nature, or was this strictly just a one-off because of the trauma of this plane crashing?
Well, I mean, certainly nothing that dramatic since then. I've probably had the garden variety of spiritual experience like William James talks about. I see it in my grandkids. I mean, there's, I think maybe it opened me up to where I'm a little more sensitive or more aware of some of these things. But certainly haven't had anything quite like that since.
Did you experience the existence of other beings, or was it just the cosmos itself and its workings and everything? Was there any sense that there were other entities present during all this?
Well, if we can move on to Act 2, this really happened in 3 parts. That one was kind of impersonal in the sense that it was imagery and it was out there, and I was part of this whole thing like I described. Well, as soon as I got back, and now I'm in the airplane, I could see the ground, I could see the horizon, I could see the sky, I could start to hear the engine again, like, okay, here we go. And then I heard a voice, and it asked me if I wanted to live or die. And it was a very soft, like a stage whisper. I don't know if you get involved in theater when you can't really yell when you're whispering in a scene, but you can't whisper either because no one's going to hear you. So it's a very loud whisper, if that makes sense. And when I first heard it, and this is after all the cosmos and everything, I was more curious about the nature and source of this voice. Like, where's this coming from? I guess I missed the message at first because the voice itself was, because I could hear it in my ears. I had the headphones on and I'm in the cockpit, but it wasn't coming through the radio. I knew that. It was distinctly different. Like, there's somebody there, and there wasn't anybody else in the plane, but I honestly thought I was going to turn around and look in the back seat because I could feel it so intensely. And I guess I got caught up in that thought. Again, this is happening in a very heightened experience where time is probably expanded or compressed depending on what's happening. And then it asked me again, like I didn't, do you want to live or die? Like, it was urgent at this point, and I knew I had to make a decision. And I actually thought about it for half a second. I knew I was going to crash. There was no getting around that. I thought maybe I had accomplished enough in this life, but at that point, I wasn't really sold on reincarnation. I was probably 27 and read a lot about it. Didn't, kind of on the fence. Didn't really know because, there's a lot of course, in the New Age and in any movement, there's people saying they know this. I'm a medium. I can, I know past lives. And I was just, I was curious, but I wasn't really on it. But I thought about it because I figured, well, if I'm just going to have to come back, maybe if I choose to live, I can stick around a little longer, clear up karma, if that's the thing. And I'm a strong, staunch believer in that now, that, maybe there was something left for me to do in this life. And given the choice, which I really didn't think I had, I just assumed I was going to be, I was going to die in this thing. But I chose to live kind of silently. I answered, live. Yes. I want to live, knowing it was probably going to be a tough road. I knew I wasn't going to walk out of it, even at that time, but willing to stick around and see what I can do while I can remember while I'm still in this incarnation and continue my path, fulfill my mission, or just move the ball down the court a little bit further, so the next me will pick it up a little bit further down the field. But that actually went into my thought process was reincarnation, and of course, ever since then, like I said, I'm a deep believer in past and future lives.
Chris, do you have any notion of where the source of this voice was? Was it something internal, or did you suspect that it might have been from an external source?
Well, it really felt like there was a presence there. It wasn't just like an intuitive impulse. It felt like another entity, another voice, and like it wasn't me. Or like, in movies, there's the devil on one side and the angel on the other. And it's like, oh, yeah, you need to do this, dude. And oh, no, you wouldn't imagine doing that. Like your own conscious speaking. It really wasn't that, because it startled me and when I first heard it. So definitely felt like it was some other being, presence, entity. I wouldn't even know how to describe it. I never really got to where that was a guardian angel. That was the voice of God. And it's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it was an intermediary. But I'm very clear it wasn't me, because like I said, it was unsettling. It's like, where's this voice coming from? Like I felt it, when someone's behind you in the line at the grocery store, the post office, and you just know there's somebody there. You have that sixth sense of, you're being watched or something like that. It was similar to that.
Would you be able to describe your state of being? Were you calm, accepting, peaceful, okay with it all? Was there any fear? What was your state of being, your state of mind at this time, dear?
Well, by this time, I was definitely less fearful than I was when I first got into trouble in the plane. That was incredibly frightening and everything, because you're not in control. Like you're supposed to be in control of an airplane, or descending with a car careening off the road. It's, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not really going to affect the vehicle. But I had surrendered. And I think that's the real strength of calling a mayday on the radio when I did. I was surrendering my life. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get out of this. I knew I wasn't going to get out of the stall in the plane aerodynamically, but I really didn't think I really thought that was it. And those would be my last words. And that's a surrender. I know in 12-step programs, usually that's the first part. You have to surrender your previous way of doing things, your best thinking that got you into this mess in the first place. You kind of have to surrender that, open yourself up to a new way. But I was wide open for that, and wide open for the experience in the cosmos, and open enough to hear this voice. So, and after I answered, I guess telepathically or just in my soul, yes, I want to live, and I'm willing to accept whatever would come next, because I thought that was the more important thing. I really felt like I was protected, like I was going to be okay. And as crazy as it looked outside the cockpit, seeing the ground coming up and the horizon falling, and just getting lower and lower, I had this sense of protection, this sense of comfort, sense of just being. I wasn't alone. There was no way I was alone, even though there was no other human being in the cockpit. I was absolutely not alone at that point.
One thing that I find very interesting about all this, Chris, is that 30 odd years later, you're still able to recall every single detail of this incident, even though, most people in those situations, one suspects, would be in a complete panic. And obviously panic stops you from thinking in any rational way. How is it that, you've retained such an intense memory of this, do you think?
Well, I'm sure in the first, several months, maybe the first year after the injury and event, I went through it over and over in my head, like, could I have done something different in the plane? What was missing? How did I get into this deep stall condition? What was this voice? What does it mean? What do I do about it? Plus, I was also very busy with learning how to get by in a wheelchair and, adjust to kind of a new normal. But it stayed, it was so impactful. It's like a dream that you have. Some people have recurring dreams. Sometimes you can have a big dream, like a dream when you're asleep, an actual dream. And it's so profound, so intense that you can't get rid of it. I mean, people say, "Oh, I don't really dream," or, I always forget, I don't write it down when I wake up, I forget my dream. Well, there are dreams in life, in your sleeping dream, that you just remember no matter what. Like you couldn't possibly, forget it. But I've gone over it, and I wrote about it in about 10 or 12 years ago. I made a film in, I guess it would have been within the first 5 years, about 5 years after the injury in 96. So it, I've thought about it, and I've talked about at least parts of it and what that might mean. So it's been kept alive. And then there's times I've gone years and I've really tried not to think about it at all. And it doesn't go away. So I think it was so intense and so profound that it was like written in stone in my consciousness and in my being. And it hasn't changed. It's not like I remember parts that I didn't remember. Oh, I forgot about that, or what about this? It's very, very consistent. Nothing's missing. Nothing needs to be added. It's almost just matter of fact, like you saw a movie, and this happened next, and they lived happily ever after or something,
Did you get the feeling during this experience that you were observing yourself from an external position? Were you seeing yourself in this awful situation of being in the plane which is plummeting to the ground?
Not at all. Not at all. I was in my body, in the cockpit of the plane, except for that beginning part where I felt like I got transported or teleported At that point, I didn't see the airplane. I didn't really even see my body. It was full. There was nothing to separate from. I couldn't, if I were to separate myself from my body, there was nowhere to go because I was in this, complete state of oneness, and there can be no separation. But no, I never felt like I was observing, watching outside of my body. It was really happening to me in my outer world because I'm in the plane, and this is actually factually happening, and everything was going on inside me, what I was experiencing in addition to the external events. So that's why I say it was so different than a near-death experience. A standard near-death experience, we're hovering over the body, or some kind of separation, or meeting somebody else. Other than the voice, I didn't see anybody or felt any of as strong as that one was. But there was it was happening to me in real time, first person. There was never any separation of, time or space or out of my body or the plane. So after having this really profound cosmic experience of the space-time continuum of all that is, everything happening at once, which is funny. There's a movie that came out a couple of years ago, Everything All at Once. That's, if you could put a title on that part of the experience, that would certainly be it, although what I experienced was much different. But it was certainly that. And then hearing this voice asking me if I want to live or die, and agreeing to it after I thought about it for a part of a second, and then feeling comfort. Then I just felt like I was waiting then. I was fully in the plane. I was fully in my body. Not that I ever really left, but it was, the voice was gone. The imagery was gone. And then I thought that was it. But then I was given, this is Act 3, the third part, I was shown 2 images, and they were just like projected in front of me. We didn't have iPads then, but it was, I was in the cockpit. It wasn't like somewhere else. I was still there, but it's like a mirage, or a vision showed up, and I knew I was going to be given 2 visions. One, what my life, this point forward, would be less like, and the other vision being more what my life would be like from this point on, which I guess is kind of the fine print. After I'd already chosen to live, I guess now I get to see the terms of the contract. I didn't really ask before, and I wasn't expecting this, but having made that decision again before the plane hit the ground, I was shown 2 images, and one of them, the first one, what my life would be less like, was kind of a bird's eye view of the beach. And it's a sunny day. There's food and there's people. There's every color of person and flavor of food. It was the 10,000 things of Taoism. It was the multiplicity. It was just this mass sea of humanity, and all the diversion and all the differences, all the distinctly different sounds and sights. And it was on the beach in front in the sun and looking down, which I thought was kind of odd. I knew that's what my life would be less like. And as that, just fun in the sun, having, a hedonistic lifestyle. But I had really given a lot of that up, or most of it, when by the time I was flying. I had my fun in the 80s with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Not that I don't like those things. I guess, drugs is taken on a different form now, but I still like the rock and roll. But I didn't, even then in the moment, I think, well, that's just weird. I don't think that I can't go to the beach anymore, hang out with friends. But in context with the second image, which came up, what my life would be more like, or more of my life would be like this in the balance of things. Not that it would never be this and would only be that, but more like. And this is actually one of the most disturbing parts of the whole experience. The image that I was shown shocked me. I gasped, like, are you kidding me? And what it was a very, very iconic, very familiar, probably the stereotypical image of a painting of Jesus. And it's one where he's kind of, looking up, and then it's actually from the 40s. Walter Salmon, called Head of Christ. It's in like every Bible printed in the mid-century. It's kind of the de facto. If you look up in the dictionary, what does Jesus look like? Well, this is that guy, not on the cross, not suffering, none of this stuff. It's just a very peaceful, this long hair and all that. But it wasn't. I knew clearly it was not an image of an icon or a person or a deity or a savior or anything like that. This was an image of a painting. I knew that in the moment. This was a painting. This is a copy of a copy of a copy of a rendition. So definitely nothing, as far as like a living thing. This was a two-dimensional image. And I thought, well, that's weird. But as I looked at it, I could see it was moving like almost in slow motion, like the hair was just, was moving. And I focused on that. And as I did, it is looking up this way. I don't know if it was left or to the right, and then turned and looked right at me. And as it did, this painting that came to life, it turned into my face, my image. And as soon as we made eye contact, like you're just looking in the mirror, like, if you ever look at yourself in the mirror really close, it's kind of weird. It was kind of like that. I was like, whoa. And then it was gone in a flash, and literally in 3, 2, 1, the plane hit the ground and the cloud of dust, and completely alive. I didn't lose consciousness. I heard the crunch, saw the dust settle, gasp for air, and, all the physical things that were then going on that I had to encounter. But yeah, that was shocking. And that's one of the parts that I didn't talk about for many, many years, because my spiritual growth and training or interest, my studies, I would have put Jesus and Christianity with a capital C really at the bottom of my list. It probably wouldn't have even made the list. It could have been Buddha. It could have been Shiva. It could have been Juggernaut. It could have been any religious or spiritual icon or guru, and that would have been okay. But this one, so I know I didn't pick that. At least I consciously didn't. Maybe part of my subconscious or my soul or some deeper part of me, but it wasn't the Chris me. That would not have been the one I would have chosen. And it certainly wasn't the one I wanted. I was kind of disappointed. I was kind of shocked, and I felt like betrayed or something. Like, why this one? What does that have to do with anything? So it took me years to kind of wrap my head around it. And a lot of the studying and interest I have in Manly P. Hall, he definitely spoke a lot about Christian mysticism and some of the Theosophists and unity, like Emmett Fox. Some of these authors really spoke about that. I got interested in much, after that. You really speak about scriptures and the life of Christ and all the symbolism in a completely different way. That's more of an inner thing, symbolic, mystic, not dogmatic, not some construct or institution or set of beliefs that you have to follow. It was, it means something different. And that's, I find mystical Christianity very interesting now. But at the time it was, it was almost like the worst thing you could have shown me after all of that. But then that was part of my challenge to unpack that over the years. Okay, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to me? How am I going to live my life like that? I never converted. I would call myself a mystic. But that never really happened. I don't feel like I'm a guru, or maybe that's what I'm supposed to be. But it's an archetypal image, and the fact that it was me. And then if you take the two images in context with each other, one is this multiplicity. It's the 10,000 things, just all this stuff of life, which is great, but that's one level of living. And this other one with this image of a savior, of, a holy person, that one in particular is really the opposite of that. That's oneness. My Father and I are one. It's not me, it's a Father within me. That this oneness in a single person, kind of a personifying this all is love, all is one, all being together. It kind of looped around. It matched up with this cosmic galaxy of the space-time continuum, where all the little pieces I was seeing and experiencing as a wholeness, as a totality, as a oneness. So that kind of helped me over the years to understand that better. And then also the personal part, it turned into me, not the other way around. It's not like I'm going to be, it's like it went this way and became me, or it was me all along. And it was then revealed that take the mask off and it was you all along. So this inner divinity and this inner life, and having, again, the mystic approach as opposed to a dogmatic or a cultic, institutional approach, is that you see the divine everywhere. It's in the rock, it's in the stone, it's in the person that cuts you off on the freeway and or somebody on the news who does something horrible. It's still in there, and it's harsh sometimes to see that or to accept that. And then it's also kind of overwhelming to accept that in yourself, because what a challenge, what a charge put on your lowly human existence, that really I'm supposed to do this, these works and greater ye shall do. It's kind of a lot to take on, but we're only given what I think we can handle. And I think growth is something that happens as long as you're moving forward. Even a wrong turn, it just shows you that there's another way, that the next path might be the one. So really no wrong answers, but I almost repelled by it at first, but I've accepted the challenge, and in whatever way I can either rise to that or demonstrate that by the fact of my own life and living in the integrity of what I choose to do with my thought, speech, and action. If I can somehow be that way, in whatever way that is, great or small, then it fits the image and it fits the challenge or the demand that was put on me.
Oh my goodness. To me, you radiate that. You do radiate that in the work that you do and what I see coming from you. And just really quickly, to me, it's the Christ consciousness within is what I see, nothing to do with religion. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing that struck me when Chris was speaking there was that this information, the beach and the Christ figure, are being presented almost in, well, not almost, but in a deeply symbolic way. And this shows the primal power of symbols as a way to communicate ideas which are not necessarily easily communicated in mere language. Is that the way you saw it, in terms of just a symbolic way that this information was coming to you?
Well, it had to have been. That was the only way I could initially make sense of it, because I knew the literal, like, I can't go to the beach, and now I have to be Jesus. That didn't really make any sense, but I knew enough about the hero's journey by then. I was deeply into Hollywood and script writing, and so a lot of these archetypal things, or the story that's beneath the story, or the message that's behind the image, that concept was certainly familiar to me. So yeah, I knew it had to be something else, and it's helped me along my way, because I've been able to draw from that experience I had that day and apply that to the things that I'm learning. Go, oh, that's kind of like what I had in the plane. And like you said about Christ consciousness, that's the thing. That's the, your inner Buddha nature, or the divine within, the infinite within. Mine happened to be that, though, but I can't completely divorce the symbolism, or the symbol itself, the iconic image. So I knew that had something to do with it. Maybe it's, pointing more towards the Western, because for a Westerner to, spiritual person to reject, the dogmatic, organized theologies of our time is pretty easy to do. Especially, growing up in the 60s and 70s and all these televangelists and the scandals and the things, it's really, kind of a turnoff. But to have that, the consciousness that's a whole different way of approaching it. But again, it was still the Christ symbolism. So like I said, it's easy to kind of just reject your own culture and go to, a guru and learn how to play sitar and take acid, or whatever you need to do to follow along with the Beatles and their trips, because it's something new and it's abstract and it's, Zen, or it's the I Ching or Taoism in the way, and these koans and paradoxical sayings that you have to wrap your head around. And but the Western part is a little more flesh and bone, a little more here and now. Plus, it's the culture in which I was born and raised, and so it really kept me from rejecting that. I still had to I still have to understand that. So through mystical Christianity, Christ consciousness, and things like that, I've been able to make more sense of it. Plus, the whole biblical journey, at least in the New Testament, I'll never read it the same way because I look at it as a mystical thing, not really as the black and white, what's on the page, even the red letters, mean something else. And really what you do with it, because that going from the Christ image to my image, my face, is that it's within you. It's something you have to, it's not out there. So that really altered my searching and my seeking. And I looked out there and I looked here and I looked there and tried to understand different traditions or understand the more Western culture more deeply. But it's never been out there for me. It's always been in here ever since then.
The kingdom of heaven is within you. And I believe that many will hear this and feel comfort and inspiration and hope. I am so proud of you, courageously, bravely choosing to stay. And what a difference you have made. I had no idea you were a grandfather. I love seeing your pictures online. And I do want to direct them to your work, to your books. And really quick, before I hand it over to Tim for some final thoughts, are you going to be returning to Living the Inner Life podcast? No pressure. Are you?
No pressure. Yes. The answer is yes.
Good.
Absolutely yes. I did about a year's worth of podcasts and I took about a year off. I wanted to regroup and really get solid on what that's all about. I think that's the key to really everything is, through your inner life. I know in this culture now we want to find somebody or something or AI to solve a problem or, a medication or something to really get you through something that's something you need to take care of in yourself. So it's probably not going to be popular because that's not a popular thing that a lot of people want to hear. But it's the only message I have because that's what I fully believe in. And so I think I'm going to bring it back, but I really want to focus on really just what the inner life is and what can be done as opposed to just kind of talking about it.
All links will be down below. It is Chris Sheridan at Chris Sheridan 33. Super quick, Chris, why the 33?
Well, that's growing up listening to albums, the 33 and a third, because I know, even as a little kid, you had to, it's not 45, it's a 33. And I thought, wow, that's a cool number. Certainly breaking my back. You have 33 vertebrae in your spinal column. Of course, I have 31 now. 2 of them were completely destroyed, and I have a bone fusion. I was literally torn in 2 on the inside. The outside, I didn't even get a cut. There wasn't a scratch. There was no blood or anything. Didn't chip a tooth or anything. Just broke my back. But yeah, the 33, it comes up. And then, of course, the Masonic imagery. I'm not a brother at this point, but I think it just comes up a lot. It's just a great number. And maybe it's just a throwaway to get an email address that no one else has. But a significant number. Yeah.
Thank you. Tim, thoughts?
This is a story with many intriguing aspects to it. Not least the fact that stuff is presented symbolically. There is this view of the cosmos. But the thing that interests me most, and when I've been researching near-death experiences in the past, people are often taken on a journey in a near-death experience. They go down a passage or a tube, which you didn't, and they come into some wonderful landscape, and they're taken on a particular journey, and then they're told, this is as far as you go. And people say, well, no, I like it here. I don't want to go back to my physical body. No, it's not your time. You have to go back and everything. But I have similarly, on rarer occasions, come across a situation where people have been presented with a choice of some kind. So it would seem that yours was, although it's not strictly a near-death experience, but it is certainly something that's closely associated with what was closely going to be your death. This choice was presented. Have you got any insight as to why that choice was presented to you? Have you had any inner thoughts about that?
Well, again, I didn't know I had a choice. Well, I didn't, or choice or not, that I would even live, just how powerful that can be. Well, one thing is that I was connected to this voice, or this voice connected to me. So I know that, if I were maybe brought up in a different tradition, I might say, well, it was my guardian angel, or I could attribute, some kind of being or something to it. But I felt that whatever that connection was to that voice, and whatever was on the other end of that voice, is still with me and always will be, even if I don't hear that voice. So that's been important, and has affected me since. Now, on occasion when I have talked about what happened, I usually get to the voice part, and as soon as I get there, often if I'm talking to somebody that's this kind of interested, they'll cut me off and go, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what I did. I never told my husband, but 30 years ago, I was in a car wreck. I was on ice, and something somewhere in my head told me to turn the wheel to the right. I would have turned it to the left or hit the brakes, and I obeyed, and I did this, and I was fine, but I never told anybody." So I think, in sharing my story, I think it also gives permission for other people to not feel alone. Maybe so many of us have had, whether it's a time in peril or with an actual injury or a strange dream or a mystical vision, that's kind of like talking about being abducted by a UFO. You're on the cover of the tabloids and people think you're crazy, but you're not crazy. And again, if sharing these experiences can help other people maybe go deeper into theirs, or more accepting of theirs, and not have, "Oh, this happened, but I don't really want to talk about it." So I've heard that several times, that it just I didn't get to finish my story, but it opened up the door for another person to connect with their own stories.
And I think the important point you're making, Chris, here is that most of this stuff is deep within us, and we all get into the habit of thinking that whatever we need is somewhere out there in the distant cosmos, where I fully believe, and many others do, that it all lies deeply within, if only we can learn how to access that.
Absolutely.
You've given people a lot of comfort, Chris. And remember, if you are listening or if you're watching this, you don't have to have a near-death experience, nor do you have to have a pre-death spiritual experience to know that all that Chris talks about also applies to you. One of the most beautiful things there's so many things I'm going to take away from this, but when you talked about how everything is not only connected, but absolutely necessary. The tiny bits are the all, and the all are the tiny bits. And everyone is essential. Everything is essential. It's beautiful. Thank you so, so much. We've got Chris's book. Again, we talked about it at the beginning. It is called The Spirit in the Sky, A Fall of Icarus, The Rise of the Phoenix, An Odyssey of the Soul, a memoir. It is available on Amazon. You should go read the reviews over there. It is a life changer. Having you today with us, Chris, is a life changer. Please give him a follow. He's over on X. I get to see him over there. That is Living Inner Life. Again, the name of the podcast is on YouTube, and he suits up and he shows up, and it is so worth it. I know a podcast is a very difficult thing. It is a very difficult thing, but you have such a story to tell. You really, really do. I'm so grateful for you. The way that I feel just listening to it, how it has helped Tim and I just being with you in this tiny moment, and being able to edit this and put this out there for everyone else. What an honor. Again, that podcast is called Living the Inner Life. And again, it is within you. It is not outside of you. Each and every one of you listening are exactly like Chris. Exactly. You don't have to have one of these to gain the wisdom earned there. And remember, the whole point of this show is called That Death Show, that there's nothing to be afraid of, that death is not a tragedy. It is not permanent. It is not fatal. It is not final. Those are Tim's words. And boy, I tell you what, we could do this forever. I could talk to you forever. We are so grateful to have you. Thank you to the one and only Chris Sheridan. You are a rock star in so many ways. So many ways. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you both for having me and giving this opportunity to share and contribute.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. It's been a fascinating experience.
Death comes to us all, but death is not a tragedy. Everyone's Book of the Dead by Tim Wyatt reveals a whole new perspective on what lies beyond this earthly life. The Egyptians have a Book of the Dead. The Tibetans have a Book of the Dead. Shouldn't you have one too? This captivating, richly illustrated book explores the mystery of death by examining it from every angle, sharing the ageless esoteric teachings on karma, reincarnation, and after-death states, as well as examining death and dying in different cultures, religions, and spiritual traditions. Death is not fatal, final, or permanent, but simply a transitional doorway to a new beginning. Get your copy of Everyone's Book of the Dead today at firewheelbooks.co.uk.